The radio crackled with static and desperation. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Neptune 6. We are taking heavy fire from multiple positions on Hill 394. Request immediate close air support." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane, leader of SEAL Team 7, but even his battle-hardened composure couldn't mask the panic bleeding through the transmission. At Bagram Airfield, Captain Valentina Viper Kozlov sat in the cockpit of her A-10 Thunderbolt II, engines already spinning up for what was supposed to be a routine patrol mission. The emergency call changed everything. Through her headset, she heard the operations center scrambling to coordinate a response. Multiple aircraft were being vectored toward the coordinates, but none would arrive for at least 20 minutes. The SEALs didn't have 20 minutes. "Control, this is Viper 17. I'm 5 minutes out from those coordinates," she transmitted, banking her aircraft toward the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. "Negative, Viper 17. Stand by for lead elements. You are not cleared for engagement." Valentina's jaw tightened. She'd heard this song before. Despite her 3 tour and more confirmed kills than most pilots in the squadron, the brass still treated her like an untested rookie. They'd rather wait for the male pilots flying their sleek F-16s than trust the woman in the ugly, slow A-10. What they didn't understand was that ugly and slow meant lethal and precise when American lives were on the line. The landscape below blurred past in shades of brown and gray. Barren ridgelines stretched toward Pakistan, honeycombed with caves and fighting positions that had sheltered insurgents for decades. Hill 394 was a strategic nightmare, a commanding position overlooking the only supply route through the Korangal Valley. Intelligence had marked it as cleared 3 days ago. Intelligence, as usual, was wrong. Through her targeting pod, Valentina could see the muzzle flashes painting the hillside like deadly fireflies. The SEALs were pinned in a depression about halfway up the slope, completely exposed and taking fire from at least 4 different positions. Bodies lay motionless in the dust. She couldn't tell if they were wounded or worse. "Neptune 6, this is Viper 17. I have visual on your position. Can you mark targets?" "Viper, we're taking too much heat to pop smoke. They've got us zeroed. Machine gun nest at your 2 o'clock from our position. RPGs at 10 and 11. There's more, but..." The transmission dissolved into automatic weapons fire and shouting. Valentina rolled inverted and pulled her aircraft into a steep dive. The A-10's GAU-8 cannon, a 7-barrel rotary beast that fired depleted uranium shells at 3,900 rounds per minute, was already armed and ready. She'd trained for this moment her entire career. Now 12 American warriors were depending on her to prove that a farm girl from Nebraska could dance with death better than anyone. The mountain rushed up to meet her, and Valentina Kozlov prepared to remind the world why they called her Viper. The hunt was about to begin, and she was the apex predator these mountains had never seen coming. Her finger moved toward the trigger as the enemy positions grew larger in her crosshairs, unaware that their day of reckoning wore the wings of an angel and carried the fury of a demon. The static cleared from Kane's radio for just a moment, long enough for him to hear 2 words that would haunt and comfort him for years to come. "Guns hot." Valentina had grown up watching her grandfather's crop duster dance between telephone wires and barn roofs in rural Nebraska. Viktor Kozlov had been a MiG pilot for the Soviet Air Force before defecting during the Cuban Missile Crisis, trading his Red Star for an American flag and a future harvesting corn instead of enemies. He taught her that flying wasn't about the machine. It was about reading the sky like a book written in wind and weather. Now, 30,000 feet above Afghanistan's unforgiving peaks, those lessons merged with 12 years of military precision. The A-10 Thunderbolt II wasn't built for elegance. It was designed around its cannon, a flying gun platform that could survive direct hits and keep fighting, just like her. "Control, Viper 17 is engaging targets of opportunity to preserve American lives," she transmitted, knowing the reprimand would come later. Court-martials seemed insignificant compared to watching good men die while bureaucrats debated clearance levels. The first machine gun nest revealed itself through sustained muzzle flash. Valentina rolled left, lined up her approach, and squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 erupted with its distinctive growl, a sound insurgents called the Dragon's Roar. 30mm shells tore through reinforced stone like tissue paper. The nest vanished in a cloud of pulverized rock and metal. "Holy shit, Viper, that's a direct hit on position 1. Kane's voice carried newfound hope. She pulled up hard, feeling 6GS press her into the ejection seat, then banked for the next target. The RPG team at 10 o'clock had made the mistake of repositioning, giving away their concealed bunker. This time she came in low and fast, the A-10's titanium bathtub armor deflecting small arms fire that sparkled against her fuselage like angry fireflies. Another burst, another target eliminated. Position 2 is down. Jesus Christ, where did she learn to shoot like that? The answer lay in 10,000 hours of training that her male counterparts had dismissed as overcompensation. While they'd been chasing glory in air-to-air combat exercises, Valentina had been perfecting the unglamorous art of close air support. Every simulation, every live-fire exercise had been preparation for this moment, when precision meant the difference between rescued heroes and flag-draped coffins. Her third pass targeted the remaining RPG position. This crew was smarter, more experienced. They waited until she committed to her attack run before revealing their position, launching 2 rockets that streaked past her canopy close enough to see the Cyrillic markings on their warheads. The irony wasn't lost on her, dodging Soviet-era weapons while flying an American aircraft, the granddaughter of a Russian pilot fighting to save American SEALs. War had a way of making strange circles. She adjusted her approach, came in at an unexpected angle, and delivered another precise burst. The hillside erupted as the RPG ammunition cooked off, sending a secondary explosion cascading down the slope. All primary targets neutralized. Neptune 6, what's your status? Viper, we've got 3 wounded but mobile. You just saved our lives, all of them. But Valentina wasn't finished. Her targeting pod had identified movement in the caves above, fighters repositioning for another assault. She had enough ammunition for 2 more passes, and she intended to use every round to ensure these SEALs made it home to their families. The girl who'd learned to fly watching her grandfather's crop duster was about to teach an entire enemy force why precision trumped firepower every single time. Kane's voice cut through the tactical frequency with crystal clarity now that the incoming fire had ceased. Viper 17, be advised, we have multiple enemy personnel fleeing northbound toward the Pakistan border. Can you interdict? Valentina banked the A-10 hard left, scanning the ridgeline through her targeting pod. Sure enough, at least 20 insurgents were breaking cover, abandoning their positions and streaming toward the border in scattered groups. These weren't random fighters. They moved with tactical discipline, bounding Overwatch patterns that suggested military training. Neptune 6, I count approximately 20 military-age males moving in coordinated fashion, engaging. The first group had made it nearly 200 meters from the cave complex when Valentina's cannon found them. The 30 shells kicked up geysers of dust and stone, but she held her fire tight, surgical strikes that eliminated threats without destroying the entire landscape. This wasn't shock and awe, this was a master craftsman at work. Her grandfather had taught her that every bullet was a promise, every trigger pull a commitment to precision. Soviet pilots, he'd explained, were trained to accomplish the mission with minimal resources, because resources were precious and lives were more precious still. The lesson had stayed with her through flight school, where instructors dismissed the philosophy as foreign thinking, right up to this moment when every round counted toward bringing 12 Americans home alive. Control, this is Viper 17. I'm Winchester on 30, she reported, meaning her cannon was empty. But the A-10 carried more than just its gun. She still had two AGM-65 Maverick missiles, and her targeting pod had identified what looked like a command bunker dug into the hillside above where the SEALs were pinned. "Viper, be advised you are not cleared for Maverick employment without higher authorization," came the response from Bagram. "Control, Neptune 6 is still taking sporadic sniper fire from that bunker. I have positive identification of military targets." What she didn't mention was the movement she'd spotted inside the bunker, personnel operating what looked like a heavy machine gun being repositioned to target the SEAL's extraction point. If they succeeded in getting that weapon operational, the rescue helicopter wouldn't be able to land. Kane's voice crackled over the radio again. "Viper, we're seeing muzzle flashes from that bunker at your 12 o'clock, about 300 meters uphill from our position. They're setting up something big." That was all the authorization Valentina needed. She lined up her approach, designated the target with her laser, and fired one Maverick. The missile streaked away from her aircraft, following the laser designation with perfect accuracy. The bunker disappeared in a massive explosion that sent chunks of concrete and steel tumbling down the mountainside. "Target destroyed. Neptune 6, what's your status for extraction?" "Viper, you've cleared our landing zone. We owe you more than we can ever repay." But as Valentina circled overhead, waiting for the rescue helicopter, she knew the real payment was watching 12 warriors walk away from a fight they shouldn't have survived. In her grandfather's philosophy, that was worth more than all the medals in the Pentagon. The inbound rescue helicopter was still 5 minutes out when Valentina's radar warning receiver lit up like a Christmas tree. Someone had just painted her aircraft with surface-to-air missile guidance radar, and the signature was uncomfortably close. Her blood turned to ice water as she realized the insurgents had been holding back their best card, a modern SAM system, probably supplied through Pakistani intelligence networks. "Neptune 6, be advised I'm being illuminated by SAM radar. Unknown system, bearing 047 degrees from my position. Viper, can you identify the system?" She was already executing evasive maneuvers, diving low to mask her heat signature against the mountain terrain. The A-10 wasn't fast, but it was tough, and Valentina had learned to use geography like armor. "Negative on system identification, but it's tracking. I'm going defensive." What happened next would be talked about in pilot briefings for years to come. Instead of fleeing to safety, Valentina turned toward the threat. The SAM system was hidden somewhere in the valley beyond Hill 394, probably mobile and preparing to engage not just her aircraft, but the incoming rescue helicopter that was carrying no defensive systems at all. Her remaining Maverick missile was designed for ground targets, but she trained extensively on improvised tactics. If she could get close enough to identify the SAM launcher, she might be able to take it out before it could fire. It was a massive risk. Surface-to-air missiles traveled at Mach 3, and the A-10's maximum speed was barely 400 knots. "Control, this is Viper 17. I'm hunting the SAM site to clear airspace for rescue operations." "Negative, Viper. Abort and return to base immediately." But Valentina was already committed. She dropped to barely 50 feet above the valley floor, using the terrain to mask her approach. Her radar warning receiver was screaming now, the threat system locked onto her aircraft and probably preparing to fire. Through her targeting pod, she spotted it, a tracked vehicle carrying what looked like a SA-8 Gecko missile system, a Soviet-era but still lethal piece of hardware. The crew was frantically trying to acquire a firing solution on her fast-moving aircraft. She had one chance, one missile, one opportunity to eliminate the threat before it could kill American aircrews. Valentina pulled the A-10 into a steep climb, exposing herself completely to enemy fire, and designated the target. Her last Maverick streaked away just as the SAM site fired two missiles in response. The next few seconds stretched into eternity. Her missile impacted first, turning the SA-8 into twisted metal and flame. But the two enemy missiles were still tracking, still closing at tremendous speed. She dove back toward the valley floor, popping chaff and flares while pulling GS that would have knocked a lesser pilot unconscious. One missile lost lock and impacted harmlessly into the mountainside. The second kept coming. At the last possible moment, Valentina pulled the A-10 into a climbing turn so sharp that metal groaned and warning lights flashed across her instrument panel. The missile passed less than 50 feet below her aircraft, its proximity fuse triggered by the chaff cloud she deployed. The explosion rocked her aircraft but didn't bring it down. Titanium armor had saved her life, just as it was designed to do. The rescue helicopter's crew chief came over the radio with obvious relief. Viper 17 were clear for approach. That was the finest flying any of us have ever seen. Valentina Kozlov had just proven that courage wasn't about having the fastest jet or the newest technology. Sometimes it was about an ugly, slow aircraft flown by someone willing to risk everything for brothers in arms she'd never met. The SEALs were going home, and that was all that mattered. The HH-60 Pave Hawk settled into the dust cloud kicked up by its rotor wash, and Valentina watched through her targeting pod as the 12 SEALs moved toward salvation. 3 were being carried by their teammates, but all were moving under their own power or with assistance. In the calculus of war, this was as close to perfect as outcomes ever came. Neptune 6, this is Rescue 77. We have all 12 souls on board and are departing the area. Viper 17, you're cleared to escort us out. Valentina fell into formation alongside the helicopter, her battered A-10 serving as guardian angel for the short flight to forward operating base shank. Through her canopy, she could see the crew chief tending to wounded SEALs in the helicopter's cargo bay. These men had families waiting for them, wives who would sleep better tonight, children who would still have fathers to teach them how to throw a baseball or braid their hair. The radio had been quiet for several minutes when Kane's voice came through, steady but weighted with emotion. Viper 17, Neptune 6. Go ahead, Neptune 6. Ma'am, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've worked with every kind of close air support you can imagine, F-16s, F-18s, AC-130 gunships, drones. I have never seen flying like what you just did. You didn't just save our lives. You reminded us why we do this job. The compliment hit harder than she'd expected. Throughout her career, recognition had come grudgingly, if at all. Male pilots were praised for aggressiveness. She was criticized for the same behavior and called reckless. They were lauded for innovation. Her adaptations were dismissed as showing off. But here, where it mattered most, where American lives hung in the balance, her skills had spoken louder than any prejudice. Neptune 6, we all signed the same contract. We all swore the same oath. Today was just my turn to honor it. Copy that, Viper. But for what it's worth, you've got a standing invitation to any barbecue any of us ever throws for the rest of our lives. Our kids are going to grow up knowing your call sign. The formation reached Fob Shank without further incident. Valentina watched the helicopter touch down and the SEALs disembark, some walking, others supported, but all very much alive. Medical personnel swarmed the landing zone, but she could see Kane standing apart from the chaos, looking up at her aircraft as she circled overhead. He keyed his radio one final time. Viper 17, from all of us to you, thank you for everything. As Valentina turned her aircraft toward home, she thought about her grandfather's words from years ago. Little Sparrow, aircraft are just metal and fuel. What makes them special is the heart of the person who flies them. Viktor Kozlov had never flown a mission like this, but somehow she knew he would have understood. The heart that had led him to defect from the Soviet Union for the promise of American freedom was the same heart that had driven her to risk everything for 12 strangers who'd become brothers in the span of 20 minutes. The mountains of Afghanistan fell away beneath her wings, but the memory of this day would stay with her forever. The debrief at Bagram was unlike anything Valentina had experienced in 12 years of military service. Instead of the usual sterile conference room with fluorescent lights and stale coffee, she found herself in the wing commander's private office, surrounded by personnel she'd only seen from a distance. Colonels and generals whose ribbon racks spoke of decades spent in harm's way. Wing Commander Colonel James Hammer Morrison stood as she entered, followed by every other officer in the room. It was a gesture of respect she'd never received before, and the significance wasn't lost on anyone present. "Captain Kozlov, take a seat." Morrison's voice carried the weight of command, but also something else, genuine admiration. "I've been flying for 28 years, and I've never read an after-action report like the one that crossed my desk this morning." The report was thorough. 12 SEALs extracted without a single KIA, multiple enemy positions neutralized, and one surface-to-air missile system destroyed. What it couldn't quantify was the precision under pressure, the split-second decisions that had turned a potential massacre into a textbook rescue operation. "Sir, I was just doing my job," Valentina replied, the standard response that had served her throughout her career. "Captain, with respect, bullshit." The profanity from a colonel caught her off guard. "What you did today was exceptional by any measure. You engaged targets without authorization, exposed yourself to surface-to-air missiles, and single-handedly saved the lives of an entire SEAL team. That's not just doing your job, that's the kind of flying they'll teach at the Air Force Academy for the next 50 years. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Phoenix Martinez, the squadron commander who had been notably absent from Valentina's previous evaluations, spoke up from across the table. "Captain, I owe you an apology. I've been so concerned with maintaining unit cohesion that I failed to recognize exceptional talent when it was right in front of me. That changes today." The words hung in the air like a ceasefire after years of undeclared war. Martinez had been the source of much of the institutional resistance Valentina had faced. The assignments to milk runs instead of combat missions, the exclusion from high-priority briefings, the subtle but persistent message that she didn't quite belong. "Ma'am, I appreciate that, but—" "Let me finish, Captain. I've recommended you for the Distinguished Flying Cross, and I'm putting you in for upgrade training to Flight Lead immediately. More importantly, you're getting assigned to our alert squadron. When American lives are on the line, I want you in the cockpit." Morrison leaned forward, his hands clasped on the polished conference table. "Captain Kozlov, there's something else. Lieutenant Commander Kane specifically requested to speak with you. He's waiting outside." Kane entered the room still wearing his combat gear, dust and cordite residue marking him as someone who'd recently been in close contact with the enemy. His eyes found Valentina's immediately, and she saw something there that transcended military rank or protocol, the look of a warrior recognizing another warrior. "Ma'am, I know you probably hear this a lot, but you saved our lives today, all of us. My guys want to do something special to show our appreciation." He reached into his cargo pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "This belonged to my grandfather. He carried it through World War II as a B-17 tail gunner. When he passed, he left it to me with instructions to give it to the pilot who demonstrated what he called uncommon valor in common circumstances." Inside the box was a simple compass, brass and steel worn smooth by decades of handling. Engraved on the back were words in neat script, "True north always." "Sir, I can't accept this. It belongs in your family." Kane smiled for the first time since she'd met him. "Ma'am, today you became family to all of us." The room full of senior officers watched in silence as a Navy SEAL presented a family heirloom to an Air Force captain, a gesture that spoke to bonds forged in combat that transcended service rivalries and institutional politics. Valentina held the compass, feeling its weight and the weight of the moment. True north had always been her grandfather's lesson, not magnetic north that shifted with conditions, but the constant bearing that never changed regardless of storms or obstacles. Today she had found her true north, and it pointed toward home. 3 weeks after Hill 394, Valentina found herself back in the cockpit of an A-10, but everything had changed. The call sign, Viper 17, now carried weight across the entire theater of operations. Ground controllers specifically requested her for danger-close missions, and helicopter pilots asked for her by name when venturing into contested airspace. The mission briefing was routine. Provide close air support for a convoy moving through the Kunar province, an area where improvised explosive devices and ambushes were daily occurrences. What made this mission different was the composition of her flight. She was leading 4 aircraft, a mixed formation of A-10s and F-16s that represented the new integrated approach to close air support. Viper Flight, this is control. Your convoy is Mustang 77, 12 vehicles moving from Fob Joyce to Combat Outpost Monty. Intelligence reports possible IED threats along Route Hyena, with confirmed insurgent activity in the surrounding hills. Captain Marcus Torch, Williams, flying Viper 13 in an F-16, came over the radio with barely concealed skepticism. Despite the recognition she'd received, some pilots still questioned whether the Hill 394 mission had been skill or luck. Williams was one of them. Viper 17, Torch here. What's our engagement protocol? I'm carrying precision munitions that can handle anything these guys throw at us. Viper 13, we maintain overwatch and respond to threats as they develop. Close air support is about precision and patience, not firepower. The convoy began moving through terrain that channeled it into predictable kill zones, exactly the kind of environment insurgents had used to devastating effect throughout the war. Valentina positioned her aircraft to provide maximum coverage while staying high enough to maintain situational awareness across the entire route. 15 minutes into the movement, her worst fears materialized. Viper 17, Mustang 77, we've got IEDs detonating on the lead vehicle, taking small arms fire from multiple positions. Through her targeting pod, Valentina could see the chaos unfolding below. The lead MRAP had been disabled by a roadside bomb, and insurgents were firing from concealed positions on both sides of the road. But this wasn't the desperate, uncoordinated attack from Hill 394. This was a well-planned ambush executed by fighters who understood how coalition forces responded to such attacks. Viper Flight, I'm seeing muzzle flashes from at least 6 positions. Torch, can you identify targets on the eastern ridgeline? Negative, Viper 17. These guys are good. They're using cover and concealment effectively. I can't get a clear shot without risk of collateral damage. That was the difference between Valentina's approach and the traditional fighter-pilot mentality. Williams was looking for clear, unambiguous targets that he could engage with precision munitions from altitude. Valentina was reading the battle like her grandfather had taught her to read the sky, looking for the subtle signs that revealed enemy positions even when they remained hidden. Viper 13, watch my approach. I'm going to draw their fire and mark targets for the flight. What happened next would be analyzed in tactical schools for years to come. Instead of staying at safe altitude, Valentina descended to just above the effective range of small arms fire and began a series of passes that forced the insurgents to reveal their positions by shooting at her aircraft. Each muzzle flash was memorized, cataloged, and marked for her wingmen. She was using herself as bait, turning her aircraft into a target to expose the enemy for her flight to engage. Viper Flight, I've got 6 confirmed positions marked. Torch, engage the bunker complex at coordinates I'm lasing. Viper 15, take the machine gun nest on the western slope. The coordinated attack that followed eliminated the ambush in less than 3 minutes. But what impressed the other pilots wasn't the tactical success. It was Valentina's willingness to expose herself to enemy fire to protect soldiers she'd never met, in service of a mission that offered no personal glory. Williams came over the radio after the last target was eliminated. "Viper 17, I owe you an apology. That was textbook leadership. I'm honored to fly on your wing." The words represented more than personal recognition. They marked the moment when institutional skepticism gave way to professional respect, when Valentina Kozlov stopped being seen as an anomaly and started being recognized as what she'd always been, one of the finest combat pilots of her generation. The convoy continued its movement without further incident, 12 vehicles and 36 soldiers safely delivered to their destination. Another routine mission in an endless war, except that routine missions were where reputations were built and legends were born. As Viper Flight returned to base, Valentina thought about her grandfather's stories of flying combat missions over Europe, how each sortie was both ordinary and extraordinary depending on the outcome. Today had been ordinary, no dramatic rescues, no impossible odds overcome. But 36 American warriors were going to sleep safely tonight because she and her flight had done their jobs with skill and professionalism. In her grandfather's philosophy, that made today extraordinary after all. The summons to Kandahar came without explanation, just orders to report to Combined Joint Operations Center within 48 hours. Valentina had never been to the massive airbase that served as the hub for coalition operations across southern Afghanistan, but its reputation preceded it. This was where strategic decisions were made and where careers were either launched or ended. The flight south took her over terrain that had been contested for decades. Ancient trade routes wound through valleys where empires had risen and fallen, where Soviet forces had learned the same bitter lessons about Afghan resistance that now confronted American and coalition troops. Her grandfather had flown missions over some of these same mountains 30 years earlier, carrying different flags, but fighting the same unforgiving geography. At Kandahar, she was met by a staff car and driven to a complex she'd only heard about in whispered conversations, the headquarters of Joint Special Operations Command, where the war's most sensitive missions were planned and executed. The building was nondescript, deliberately designed to avoid attention, but the security measures spoke to the importance of what happened inside. Lieutenant General Patricia Valkyrie Santos was waiting in a conference room that held more classified material than Valentina had ever seen in one place. Maps covered every wall, marked with symbols and annotations that told the story of a conflict that had evolved far beyond conventional warfare. "Captain Kozlov, please sit. I've been reading about your recent missions, and I have a proposition for you." Santos was a legend in her own right, the first woman to command a special operations aviation unit, with a reputation for demanding perfection and getting it. Her call sign, Valkyrie, referenced both her role in delivering warriors to battle and bringing them home again. "Ma'am, I'm honored to be here, but I'm not sure what I can offer at this level." "Captain, what you can offer is exactly what you demonstrated on Hill 394 and a dozen missions since then. The ability to make split-second decisions that save American lives. I'm putting together a special operations aviation unit that will support our highest priority missions. I want you to be part of it." The offer was unprecedented. Special operations aviation was the elite of the elite, pilots who supported missions that never appeared in newspapers and whose successes were measured in lives saved rather than medals earned. It was also a community that had been notably resistant to female pilots, citing the physical demands and operational security requirements as justification for exclusion. "Ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for special operations work." Santos smiled, the expression of someone who'd heard similar doubts expressed by male pilots who'd gone on to distinguished careers in special operations. Captain, let me tell you what qualifications really matter in this business. First, the ability to fly precise missions under extreme pressure. Check. Second, the judgment to make life-or-death decisions without hesitation. Check. Third, the courage to put yourself at risk for others. Double check. She gestured toward the maps on the wall, each marked with locations where Special Operations Forces were conducting missions that would determine the course of the war. What I'm offering you is a chance to support missions that can change the strategic picture, but I need to know that you're ready for the responsibility. Valentina thought about Cain and his SEALs, about the convoy in Kunar province, about all the missions where her decisions had meant the difference between American warriors going home or not going home at all. Every flight had been preparation for this moment, the opportunity to serve at the highest level of her profession. Ma'am, when do I start? Right now. Your first mission brief is in 30 minutes, and you'll be flying with Captain Jake Ghost Morrison, no relation to your wing commander. He's been doing this job for 8 years and will serve as your mentor while you learn our procedures. As Santos led her toward the briefing room, she paused at a wall displaying photographs of Special Operations aviators who had been killed in action. The faces were young and old, male and female, representing every branch of service and every background imaginable, united only by their commitment to bringing others home safely. Captain Kozlov, these people represent the standard you'll be held to. They gave everything in service of missions that most people will never know about. Are you ready for that responsibility? Valentina looked at the faces on the wall, warriors who had made the ultimate sacrifice in service of something larger than themselves. Her grandfather had faced the same choice decades earlier when he decided to defect from the Soviet Union, the decision to serve something greater than personal ambition or survival. Yes, ma'am, I'm ready. The mission briefing revealed details that changed everything Valentina thought she knew about the war in Afghanistan. For 3 months, intelligence assets had been tracking a high-value target designated Objective Red Wing, a Taliban commander who coordinated attacks across multiple provinces and served as liaison with foreign terrorist organizations. Captain Jake Ghost Morrison looked like he'd stepped out of a recruiting poster, but his briefing style was all business. 8 years of special operations flying had taught him to focus on details that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Viper, our target is moving through a compound approximately 40 kilometers northeast of here. Delta Force has been tracking him for 72 hours, and tonight presents our best opportunity for interdiction. The challenge is that he's traveling with a convoy of civilian vehicles through populated areas. The tactical situation was a nightmare scenario for close air support, distinguishing between legitimate targets and civilians in an environment where insurgents deliberately used human shield to complicate coalition operations. One mistake could result in civilian casualties that would undermine years of counterinsurgency efforts. Ghost, what's our engagement authority? Extremely restrictive. Positive identification required on all targets. No engagement within 50 meters of civilian structures. And we need real-time confirmation from ground assets before any weapons release. The ground assets in question were 12 Delta Force operators who had been infiltrated into the area 24 hours earlier. Their mission was to maintain surveillance on the target and guide precision strikes that would eliminate the high-value target while minimizing collateral damage. Red Wing Base, this is Viper 17 and Ghost 23, checking in on station. Viper and Ghost, Red Wing Base. We have eyes on target convoy, 3 vehicles moving southbound on Route Silver. Target vehicle is the middle sedan black Toyota Camry with tinted windows. Through her targeting pod, Valentina could see the convoy moving through a market area where dozens of civilians were conducting evening business. Children played in the streets, while their parents negotiated prices for everything from vegetables to cell phones. It was exactly the kind of environment where surgical precision was required, but nearly impossible to achieve. Red Wing Base, I'm seeing significant civilian activity in the target area. Can you confirm minimal civilian casualties if we engage? Viper, target vehicle just turned into a compound with high walls. We're seeing approximately 8 military-age males with weapons. Civilian presence is minimal in the compound itself, but the surrounding neighborhood is populated. Ghost came over the radio with years of experience evident in his voice. Viper, this is what we train for. Precision strikes in complex environments. You've got the best targeting system in the inventory and the skills to use it. Trust your training. The convoy had stopped inside the walled compound, and through thermal imaging, Valentina could see individuals moving between the vehicles and several buildings. Some were carrying weapons. Others appeared to be unloading equipment or supplies. The challenge was identifying which individuals were legitimate targets and which might be civilians caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Red Wing Base, can you confirm target identification on individuals within the compound? Viper, we have positive identification on Objective Red Wing exiting the target vehicle. He's moving toward the main building, accompanied by 6 armed personnel. This was the moment every pilot trained for but hoped never to face, the decision to take a life based on split-second analysis of incomplete information. The target was a terrorist responsible for the deaths of American and coalition forces, but he was also a human being surrounded by other human beings whose status remained unclear. Valentina lined up her approach, knowing that the next few seconds would define not just the success of this mission, but potentially the trajectory of her entire career in special operations aviation. Her finger moved toward the trigger as the compound grew larger in her cross.